You walk into the kitchen and open the fridge, and you look inside and you're like, huh, I think I got only enough groceries to make me through maybe dinner, possibly Tuesday morning breakfast. And then your fiance's like, hey, it's going to cost maybe $300 to buy enough groceries for the next week. You know what'll be cheaper? Hmm, let's just order Uber Eats and for, breakfast, lunch, and dinner at maybe 25, $30 a pop. Because that'll be cheaper because breakfast 30, lunch 30, dinner 30. That's only $90 compared to the $300 we'll have to pay for the entire week of groceries. Let's do that. Technically, yes, that is cheaper in the short term, but in the long term, of course, it costs a lot more. That's how I feel about articles like this, where they're like, hey, renting a three-bedroom is cheaper than owning one in 90% of the US, report says. Who cares what it costs today to own a property versus today to rent a property? The real question is it cheaper to own a property today than it will be to rent the equivalent property 5 years from now? The answer to that question almost always is it'll be cheaper to buy today than it will be to rent in the future. I'll even give you this scenario. Another curious thing in this article is they say owning instead of buying. Anyone that owns a property currently could care less what the current cost to buy the property is because they already own the property. Case in point, I am currently sitting in a three-bedroom property in the state of Texas that I bought in 2017. My interest rate was 3.5%. I have never refinanced the property, not even during the COVID rates, because the principal and interest payment was cheap enough that it didn't make sense to refinance. So I'll give you this scenario. I'm not going to give you the exact numbers of my mortgage, but let's say my mortgage in 2017 was $2,000. Well, taxes, insurance go up. So now today my mortgage may be about $2,300. Let's even say it's $2,500. It's gone up $500 in the last 7 years. Well, guess what? I could rent this property for more than $2,500. Let's say possibly $3,000. So to me, I could care less what it costs to buy this property in today's market. But let's say for some reason someone else wanted to buy this property and turn it into a rental. Yes, in that scenario, it may not make sense because depending on what their rate is, what the down payment is, let's say it may cost $3,050 in order to own this property versus renting. And then of course you have to tack on all like the maintenance and things that you have to do to maintain a house. So let's say the overall living expense for that person is $3,300. So yes, in that scenario, of course it makes more sense in the short term for them to possibly like rent this property than to own the property. But then the question is, let's say this person that's renting this property stays here for the next 5 years. Will the rent surpass $3,300? Most likely it will. Let's say it exactly breaks even at $3,300 in 5 years. Well, what happens after year 6, 7, 8, 9? Like, are they going to keep renting? Are they going to buy a home and then start that clock over again where, hey, it may be slightly cheaper to rent than it is to own, but now I'm 5 years behind. I could have built equity, etc. So, yeah, these articles are always curious to me. Like I said, I'm not some conspiracy theory dude, but I wonder like what the point of someone pointing this out is, because for people that don't have any perspective, they look at this and they're like, hey, I'm making this great decision to rent. Then 5 years pass, 10 years pass, 15 years pass, and they're still renting a property where on the other side of the coin, they could have made a smaller or an investment up front, pay more in the short term, but in the long term, they are winning because guess what? 30 years are going to pass whether you rent a property or own a property. In one scenario, at the end of 30 years, you have a paid off asset. So yeah, you're just still paying like taxes and insurance, but you're paying a lot less than you would if you were to rent the property. And guess what? To all my long-term investors that like to point out that, hey, if you're 25 and invest $347 into the S&P 500, by the time that you're 65, you'll have $2.7 million. That is a great thing to point out, and you should be investing in that as well. But the same math works when we're talking about owning real estate. In 30 years, you'll have a paid off asset. I'm a realtor in Dallas and would love to help you reach your goals of home ownership. So click the link in the description and just schedule a call no matter where you are on your journey. Not in Dallas? No worries, I can help connect you with a vetted realtor in your local jurisdiction as well. And feel free to share with friends, family, and foes. Everyone gets love. And at the end of those 30 years, you can, because most likely you're not going to be living in the same property for 30 years, but you can potentially move back into that property at your older age. You could pass it down to your kids or grandkids, and now they have a huge head start in life because they're starting off with the paid off asset, so they have a much smaller living expense than their friends who are now like renting a property. Like, this is how the rich get ahead, is they think long term, and now they have their kids staying essentially rent free or at a super low level of rent in the property so that they can put their assets towards other things like investing. But folks can never get ahead in life with this short-term thinking where I'm like, hey, well, it's 2024, it's cheaper to rent than it is to own. 2025, cheaper to rent than it is to own. Yes, if you compare every year to every year, it most likely will be, actually, in almost every scenario, it's cheaper to rent to own because of all the upfront cost of owning. But if you look at the long-term, the big picture, it makes more sense financially to own the property. Every bit of data out there says that it makes more sense to own than to rent long term. There is a reason that renters, people that own real estate have a net worth that's like 44 times the average renter. So I'll leave you with that stat. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'll throw up another chart that breaks down the average net worth of folks by race. So it crosses all racial lines as well. And to be clear, this is not a anti-renting rant. This is a pro-ownership rant. But as always, buy land. Rumor has it they're not making any more.